delighted to have Kevin Kamuya of Utooni Development Organization to share their experiences with sand dams. I've just discovered that I visited them when they were called a different name in Machakos. That was back in 2006, 2007. But I haven't, this is the first time to meet Kevin, who's an Utooni are members of Pelham, and I think many of you know Pelham Association in Pelham, Kenya. I've often heard of the good work that Utooni are doing in the drier parts of Kenya. And Kevin, you know, Richard, who visited you 18 months ago, he gave me one of your cowpea varieties. And it's last year in my dryland area, it was definitely the star crop. It's a really good variety. So thank you for that. So Kevin, I'll leave you to introduce yourself, and thanks so much for giving us this time to present what you're doing with communities. And as Minnie said, there'll be this presentation, and then your presentation will go up onto the platform for others to share whenever they wish. So it'll become part of that platform. So did you want to say anything first, Minnie, before Kevin?
Maybe just to add a little bit that, you know, the question Kevin had, and for any new participants in this forum, that this is, the title is the Water School Africa, and the words we've used water school to, you know, the work that we're doing with communities and community-based practices and wisdom in bringing the water back, whether it's a dry, very dry, arid area or a completely flooded area. The community wisdom that brings the water, the landscape back to health, these are the practices that we are sharing through the water school. So it's a global water school. We've got practices from India, and now, of course, the Water School Africa, as we're working and seeing how this will develop. We work in Colombia, Latin America. So slowly it's a developing forum. It's developing for communities, the wisdom of communities, and how can we share them with communities globally. So that's a small introduction. The link is waterways.world. We'll put the links in later, but I'm really keen to now hear from Kevin. We've heard of sand dams many times, and I'm just so excited to see how much work that they've done. So over to you, Kevin. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much. We feel quite honored to be doing a presentation here today. My name is Kevin Monene Kamuya. I am married and I have 3 children. My firstborn son is 12 years old. My second old daughter is 8 years old, and my thirdborn son is 3 years old. And I've been working with Utooni Development Organization now for the past more than, I think, 12 years. And I joined the organization when it was called Excellent Development Kenya. But eventually the founder changed the name to Utooni Development Organization to reflect its indigenous roots. The organization began from a small village called Utooni, and that's why the organization changed its name from Excellent Development Kenya to Utooni Development Organization. I started working in the organization as a junior monitoring, evaluation, training, and development officer, and eventually I got promoted to the position of the chief executive officer after working in various positions in the organization. I have prepared a presentation for you today, and I'd like Minnie to give me my first slide so that I can start sharing about our work, working with community members to improve water security in the arid areas of Kenya, and that is mostly in the eastern province of Kenya. As I had said, my name is Kevin Kamuya, and I'm the program manager or the chief executive officer. I want us to go to the mission of the organization, and the mission, as I had earlier said, is that the organization was registered in the year 2005 as a non-governmental organization in Kenya. and which later changed its name to Excellent Development Kenya. That was after around 4 years in order to reflect its indigenous name. The mission of the organization is to work with community self-help groups, enabling them to improve and transform the environment in a sustainable manner, enabling them to improve water supply, food production, income, and health. Just maintain that slide, please. We employ an holistic approach while in the work that we do. We train communities first to improve water security, and working with them when they improve water security, we go towards improving food security and eventually income. And all these components add up to improving the health of the community. That's why we call it an holistic sand dam construction approach. Next. We have several projects in our organization, the biggest one being the environment conservation and water harvesting through construction of the sand dam, water tanks, and shallow wells. This is our main brand as an organization, and we are very proud of it because we've constructed very many water facilities over the past 2 decades. Our organization started working even before it was registered. I hope I'd said that earlier on before most of you had joined. And I would like to say that our second project is Climate Smart, where we promote conservation agriculture and the 3 principles of conservation agriculture. The third newest project in our organization is agroecology farming, where we promote food forests, tree nurseries, and kitchen gardens. I would like to take you to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, this was the situation before we started constructing sand dams and water tanks and shallow wells. You can see the wells that the community members were digging in our area of scope. These wells will be dug even to 10 feet deep. And you can imagine that woman who is fetching water on the right slide. She's almost very, very far away deep. And taking a jerrycan from there upwards without somebody to support you is quite challenging. The quality of water is also compromised because at night animals come to drink in this kind of wells which are dug along river banks, because that's where at least the water table is a little bit high. You can see the queues. The queues were quite long, where there are water sources like boreholes, alternative water sources, and people would just queue for water for the entire day just to get a few jerry cans for their household use. Next slide, please. So what is a sand dam? I would like to introduce you to a sand dam, and it's a concrete wall which is constructed along a seasonal river, and it is meant to harvest runoff water during the rainy season. And the best thing with this kind of harvesting water is that you don't need to be worried even if it doesn't rain where the sand dam is constructed. If it rains far away upstream, then this particular facility, the water runs downwards, and when it reaches the sand dam, it's absorbed into the sand, and then from there you can install a well to help the community members to access water from underneath the sand. This kind of technology stores water in the sand. It's like a sponge. A sponge, when you pour some water into a sponge, then you squeeze it, you're going to find there's quite a lot of water that comes out of it. But if you don't squeeze the sponge continues to hold that water. So it is the kind of principle that is used in storing water in these concrete walls that are constructed across the seasonal rivers. We've done very many of this, and right now as I talk, we have not received rains in Kenya. We were expecting rains in mid-October, but most community members are really relying on these structures to access water because the water pans have the water has evaporated, and if there is any water, it's quite contaminated because of the high demand that is currently there. So I would say that a sand dam can take a community from one rain season to the other rain season, providing them with water for household use and also for their livestock. Next slide, please. Yeah, now I would like to take you through the process of constructing a sand dam. As you can see, that's a community group walking along a river with a team from Utooni Development Organization. This is during feasibility study. Let's go back to the other slide. This is during feasibility study where the community members, together with the skilled labor, that is UDO staff, we work through the other slide where the community is working on the river. Yes, that slide. We work with the community members along these channels for them to propose potential sites for construction of sand dams. We don't like to impose solutions or tell communities where they will construct sand dams, but when visiting communities doing feasibility study, we tell them, kindly find us 3 or even 4 sites where you think it will be potential or it's going to be viable for you to do a sand dam. So this photo was taken during a feasibility study. These are community taking us through a seasonal river for us to see where they want their sand dams to be constructed, and then we advise them further. Next. Before we start constructing a sand dam, we engage community members to participate in the project because for the purpose of building project ownership. And community members contribute labor and skilled labor. They contribute sand, they contribute stones and water for constructing the sand dam. The other hardwares are sourced by Utooni Development Organization through their partners or donors for buying timber. All hardwares that need to be bought from the shop are sourced from donors. So this is a cost sharing project where the community contributes and also the donors contribute. This is a photo of a community that is digging a terrace along the banks of a potential sand dam site before construction. Next slide. Now construction work has begun, and as you can see, this is a very lengthy sand dam. This is almost more than 70 meters, more than 60 meters. And you can see there is quite a lot of, the formwork has already been done. The community is providing unskilled labor. You can see there are drums, there are skilled laborers from Utooni Development Organization to make sure that the standards of the structure have been met. A good sand dam has to be constructed along a river with a basement rock. So this dam is going down into the rocks. It's not just being constructed on top of the sand. So when we are doing feasibility study, we make sure that the rock cuts across the river so that we drill holes and put reinforcement rebar to make the structure stronger, and also to make sure that the engineering standards are observed, because you cannot put a structure on top of sand. It has to be on a rock. So there is a lot of reinforcement that is done. There is barbed wire. There is also rebar that goes hand in hand with the mortar and the stones for reinforcement purposes. Let's go to the next one. Now, when it rains, you can see now the environment starts, the vegetation starts regenerating around the sand dam. And this is a very, very viable project for the ASAL areas, that is the arid and semi-arid lands. Because the way the water is stored is that when it rains, yes, the water is on the surface. But after it rains, you can see in the next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, you can see now this is a sand dam that is mature. Although you cannot see the shallow well where the community accesses water for domestic use, it has to be along the banks. Now the water table has risen, and also the amount of sand on that sand dam has also gone high with the same height of the dam. If the spillway is at 3 meters, then that you can calculate how much drawback of sand and water is in this particular river, comparing with it with the gradient of the river. So this is a dam that was done in the year around, it was done in 2014, and you can see the amount of sand and water it has harvested. And this photo was taken less than 3 months ago, and there is quite a lot of water. And as you can see in the background, there are some people who are trying to dig wells to do irrigation, and the communities access water from the shallow well, which is a little bit far away from this dam. It's only that you can not see, but it's on the right bank. That's where the communities access water for domestic use. But community members along the channel are free to dig wells, to scoop or big scoop holes and pump water to their farms. As we proceed on, let's go ahead. Next slide. Yeah. So as you can see, a sand dam, an average sand dam can harvest more than 40 million liters of water, can store more than 40 million liters of water. So this water is for domestic use, livestock use, and also irrigation. When you look at this photo, you are going to see in the background, it's quite dry compared to where these crops are planted. These are maize intercropped with cowpea. When you plant maize during the dry season, you fetch good money if you sell it raw, unlike when you plant it during the rainy season. So maize can be planted even during the dry season by community members. It is sold when it is raw. And then cowpea can also provide, it's a pulse, it provides pulses, and also the leaves can be harvested as a side salad. So this is a project which really enables community members to do large-scale irrigation during the dry season, because there is plenty of water in the sand dam, and this water continues to recharge in the evening when it is not being used. Because when you dig in whichever season or river during the dry season, you will find there is always a considerable amount of water. When you go to around 3, 4, 5 feet deep, you find some water oozing out. So that's the same technique that these sand dams use to recharge even without water. And luckily, if it rains upstream and if it doesn't rain in this particular area, the sand dam recharges itself and stores that water before the water gets to the spillway level, and then starts flowing downstream. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is water from the sand dam, can also be used to rehabilitate degraded lands. We have more than 30 tree seedlings right now as I talk that have not less than 2,000 seedlings per tree nursery. This is made possible by the water that is stored behind these sand dams that we are constructing with community members. Before sand dams, it would be very difficult to maintain tree seedlings. For those of you who have been to Kenya, you know we were expecting rains in mid-October, but it has not yet rained even now. And just imagine if you had a tree nursery and you didn't have water. Nobody is buying tree seedlings now because they don't know when it's going to rain. But this is being made possible by the sand dam water. Community members are able to manage big tree nurseries. And these tree seedlings are shared just before the rain by community members who participate in these projects. And then the surplus is sold to generate income for community members. So these are tree nursery that has citruses, mangoes, and avocado. Next, please. Yeah, this is the same explanation I was given about the tree nurseries, that the availability of water in the sand dams makes it possible for community members to engage in other agroecological activities like managing tree nurseries. These are onion seedlings being irrigated, waiting to be shared by community members and transplanted to their farms. And as I had said, the surplus is sold to other community members or even the county government for them to take to other areas. Next slide, please.
So genial.
I would like to talk about the shallow wells, and these shallow wells are meant to improve the quantity and quality of water access from the sand dam by community members. I have talked about sand dams and their importance, but how does the community access water? Because we don't want them to access dirty water. And the purpose of introducing this particular project that is being funded by the Primates World Relief Development Fund, The Sand Dam project was funded by the Canadian Food Grains Bank and Mennonite Central Committee, but they did not have a component of how the water was to be accessed by community members, how quality of water was to be improved, and therefore through other partners like PWRDF, we were able to introduce the shallow well project in areas where we had constructed sand dams previously. And this project is now almost 3 years old, and it has had quite a lot of impact too. The shallow wells also improved to reduce the time spent queuing for water, since refilling jerrycans with hand pumps takes shorter time. And then we also avoid the risk of scoop holes. Those scoop holes, the ones we saw in the first slide, collapsing while people are fetching water. Water contamination is reduced. Water management is made much easier because the pump can be locked and opened at specific agreed times. And the women and girls feel secure fetching water from shallow wells fixed with hand pump, unlike going down into the scoop holes that are almost 5 to 10 feet deep early in the morning hours or maybe in the evening hours. And the other thing is that animals cannot fall into the shallow well since it's enclosed, unlike the traditional scoop holes that communities used to access water from. Next slide, please. This is a stakeholder meeting along the riverbanks. They are trying to agree on where they want their shallow well. So we try to do a participatory approach before we know where to locate our water harvesting facilities, which is very important because we want to improve project ownership from the word go. Next. This is a training before a shallow well is constructed, whereby we train communities on how to treat water before use. And these are training on water, sanitation, and hygiene, conducted by Utooni Development Organization field staff. Next. Now the community digs the well, contributes unskilled labor, stones, and sand for constructing a shallow well. As you can see, this is a very lucky community. They have managed to access water at less than 10 feet. So when this water starts coming out, we have some water pumps which we support the communities with to pump water out as they continue to dig deeper. So if it comes to the water is too much, then we know that they'll get enough water from this. Water is coming from a nearby sand dam. As I had said, the shallow well is dug somewhere along the banks of the sand dam site. So this is how it happens. Sometimes the water comes out faster than thought. So we pump it out, and then the community can continue digging. So if communities cannot contribute unskilled labor, they are free to contribute some little amounts and pay a casual laborer to do this work. Next slide. Now this is the process of sinking the culverts after the shallow well has achieved its depth. And we use these perforated culverts because they are stronger and you are able to implement the shallow well in very few days, avoiding it from collapsing. Maybe rain might come anytime if it's not constructed. The other thing, it's less labor intensive, and they are largely available in our community members. We have an artisan who does them, and several others have been trained on how to make these perforated culverts for putting them into that. One shallow well can accommodate 6 to not more than 8 culverts. Next. Now, after the culverts have been sunk using the pulley, the process of now making the slab and fixing the hand pump, or maybe the solar pump. Sometimes we fix a solar pump. We started doing that last year, and it's also working very well. I can share with you later on photos of the solar pump, which helps community members to pump water further from the river. As you can see on this photo, the river is just adjacent to the pump on the right side. and then the shallow well is there. It's the offtake mechanism that community members use to access water from underneath the sand, from the sand dams. So this shallow well, it was done last year, and it had quite a lot of water. Next. Now you can see the community starts accessing water from the shallow well. You can see it's very clear. I don't know if you'll be able to see the water. It's quite clean because after sinking the culverts, there is a filtration system that we construct on the space that is left between the bank and the culvert. That is filled with a filtration system to avoid dirty water from getting into the well. And as you know, water is a good water purifier. And so if the water is coming from the sand into the well, you can imagine how clean it is before it enters the well. And then it's being filtered again by the filtration chamber around the perforated culverts. At the end of the day, you are able to access clean water, but we advise communities to treat water before they consume it. Next. Next, yeah. So you can see on average, a shallow well produces at least 2,000 liters of water per day. That is 100 jerrycans of 20-liter jerrycans, like the ones you can see on the photo. Those are 20-liter jerrycans, the yellow ones. So in a day, on average, the least amount of water the community members can get is 2,000 liters. But if you leave the shallow well for a few hours, then it recharges itself, because it is just an offtake system. It is not the storage. Actually, the storage is the sand dam. The shallow well is not the storage. The shallow well is an offtake system constructed just adjusting the sand dam to enable community members to access water faster and in much cleaner and in more quantity. Next, please. Next slide. I would like to do a presentation in a nutshell of our achievements over the past 2 decades. We've managed to construct more than 1,573 sand dams, which were funded by different donors, being MCC, CFGB, Salvation Army, AP Insurance Kenya, both local and international donors working together to enable community members implement sand dams along seasonal rivers in Kenya. We also did a few sand dams in Tanzania through consultancy. And we don't only work in Kenya, we work also in other countries, but through consultancy, working through existing organizations on the ground. The length of terraces dug is at now more than 1.8 million meters. And these are terraces dug to harvest runoff and also to prevent runoff from going to the sand dams, and also to help farmers, individual farmers, to reduce soil erosion and land degradation on their farms. So what we do is that every community provides target of how many lengths of terraces they want to dig. As individuals, it is incorporated into a group, so we know each group target is how much, and at the end of the year we do a monitoring and evaluation to know how much length of terrace they have managed to achieve by measuring physically. The number of masonry water tanks constructed is 64. We employ the same approach in constructing the masonry water tanks. That is, the community provides stones which are locally available, but we provide them tools to enable them to harvest these stones. They also provide sand and unskilled labor during construction of masonry water tanks. The number of shallow wells sunk is 56, and the number of direct beneficiaries reached through our projects is above 48,000 now, and the number of indirect beneficiaries is now is more than 900,000. These figures continue to increase each year, and these figures were captured towards the end of next year. We are going to do a monitoring and evaluation again before the end of the year, so that we can upgrade these targets that we have achieved. Let's go to the next slide. We also have challenges as an organization in the work that we do. One of the challenges that we have is devolved government in Kenya. I hope you know all that now we are in a decentralized system of governance in Kenya, where the counties are introducing a different way of working in the community. That is contracting. They are sending contractors to the ground to construct a sand dam and do everything. The community is not contributing, and this really affects project ownership, whereby you tell communities to contribute stones and sand and unskilled labor, but they tell you that, oh, the county government is doing this through contractors, they are doing everything, which is costing a lot of money for the county government. But we are talking with them at least to adopt a participatory cost-sharing approach in order to improve project ownership. Another issue is dependency syndrome in some communities, where they expect to be given inputs and handouts. There are some communities who wish to be paid to contribute towards a sand dam construction. They like sometimes to be given food, which is sometimes not budgeted, or there are no resources to buy food for them, because they're supposed to provide food for themselves when working on site. So there are these different kinds of dependency syndrome characteristics experienced in some communities, but not all of them. So in some cases, top-down approach in designing projects by some donors is also a very big challenge. In the projects that we do, you find a donor wants things to be done their own way without considering what the community is really proposing. Rural to urban migration by youth is another one. Youth have the power, they have energy to work in the community. They can form groups and work, but you rarely find them in the rural areas where they are highly needed. So most of the time you find you are working with people who are 40 years and above, some of them even 60, 70 years, who don't have a lot of energy to do manual work. Climate change is also causing frequent droughts. As I had earlier said, that we have been waiting for rains, it's not yet rained. We are going through a drought here in Kenya. Erratic rainfall and unpredictable weather pattern are some other challenges, whereby you find now if it doesn't rain soon, everybody is going to a sand dam, and it's the only source of water in a particular area. The other water sources are depleted, and then you find it causes some kind of conflicts in the community when everybody is bringing their livestock to a particular water source facility to access water. COVID-19 is another one which really hit us hard. You could find that mobilizing community members was a very big challenge. Nobody wanted to go out to work in groups. At some point, we had to divide groups to work in cohorts. These are groups of 8 to 10 people in order to observe government regulation on COVID-19. Next slide, please. Our work has also had quite a lot of achievement over the years. In the year 2014, we were awarded with the prestigious UNDP Equator Initiative Award in New York City. And in the year 2015, we got accredited to the UNHCCD Observer Status, that is the United Nations Convention for Combating Desertification. And we've been attending UNCCD meetings, but unluckily we didn't attend COP26 in Glasgow because of COVID-19, but we were there through virtually. We joined the webinars that were being conducted there to put across the statements that we had from the communities. We are members of PELAM Kenya, which were formed since 2013, and it is a network of, I think now we are even more than 52 NGOs in Kenya. And this is a platform that has really helped us to link up and partner with other Kenyan organizations, sharing experiences and also working together, building synergy in order to do bigger projects and do it better. And there's quite a lot of learning that has come from this PELAM Kenya network, and very good partnerships which are being nurtured and are being, we are embracing them very much in order for one organization to learn from the other. We are a founding member of Conservation Agriculture Hub in Kenya. In fact, it was born at Utooni Development Organization offices. That was around 6 years ago. And this is a hub where members share anything to do with conservation agriculture, promoting the 3 principles of conservation agriculture, that is minimum soil disturbance, soil cover, crop rotation, and association. And this has been a very big project in various organizations who were promoting conservation agriculture for the past 5 years. And now we are convincing the government to establish policies that are favorable for promoting conservation agriculture. The other achievement is that we are exempted from paying income tax by the Kenya Revenue Authority after going through a serious scrutiny process to see how our projects are really benefiting the communities. They saw it possible for us to get that exemption. So we've been exempted for the past 5 years because of the kind of work that we are doing to the communities and making them benefit directly. We also have a staff welfare. I won't finish without talking about our staff. We have a staff social welfare that has been supporting staff for the past 10 years for the great work that they've been doing. And this is a welfare which responds to emergency needs among staff members, and also it helps them to access soft loans, because accessing loans from the banks is quite expensive. And the same approach has been emulated in the community members, where now they are doing village savings and loaning associations. Next slide. Our website is www.utoonidevelopment.org. Our official email is utoonidevelopment@gmail.com. And asante, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kevin. This is what inspires us to do the work we do, that communities, when they come together and they share their traditional wisdom and look at the phenomenal work your organization has done, the impact it has had on so many communities. This is what Water School is all about. How do we share this within communities? How do we share this knowledge? It's not rocket science. It is a wisdom that resides in different communities across the world. And this is what the COP26 should be doing. So you're actually doing very well by not going there, but doing the work on the ground, spreading it into the communities. This is what will impact climate change, not the conversations that are happening behind closed doors alone. I won't say that they're totally useless, but this action on the ground with communities is what will really impact climate change and make communities water rich and rich again. So thank you very much for sharing your work with us. As I said, it's phenomenal. I am sure our participants today have been equally delighted listening to the quality, the quantity, the kind of work that communities are doing with the Utooni Development Organization. We have about 45 minutes with us. We'll, and there are many questions I can see in the chat. So the forum, we will now open out for questions that people want to ask. You can either put up your hand or I can look up in the chat and ask the questions. So we can, it's a free flowing part of the session now. And we can start with any burning questions that you have. I could start it off by asking one of the questions that has been put in the chat here is, how do sand dams deal Never Mujere has asked this question, with heavy seepage of water, since sand, since sand very pervious, it loses water to ground rapidly. So how do sand dams deal with the heavy seepage of water, since sand is very porous and of course it can lose groundwater rapidly? So Kevin.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. How do sand dams deal with heavy seepage of water? I would like to say, with a good feasibility study, getting to know the right location to construct a sand dam is very important. If you look at also the type of soil where you are doing the sand dam, you are able to know if that kind of soil is going to hold water or it's going to allow seepage. Most of the time seepage is caused by the type of soil around the sand dam site. I would like to say that the best soil is a clay, loamy soil, and also sandy, rocky surfaces are the best for doing sand dams. So if you don't have such kind of soil, just make sure that your sand dam site foundation rock cuts across the river. And by doing that, you'll be able to prevent seepage. and prevent water from getting out of the dam. If you do a strong rock, a strong wall that lies on the foundation rock, then you're able to minimize the seepage, and whatever water is going to be absorbed into the soil, eventually the sand dam will be able to hold water and sand, which will come from upstream. Thank you.
So thanks, Kevin. There's a question from Jane, but I also want to say, if anybody wants to put, you haven't put the question in the chat and you want to put, ask the question, do put up your hand and I'll come to you as soon as I can. So here's a question from Jane. Due to the changes in the environment, most rivers, even in what used to be high rainfall areas, are drying up. Can we apply the sand dam technology there with success?
Yeah. You can apply the sand dam technology in any river. The reason why we target seasonal rivers is not because you cannot construct a sand dam on non-seasonal rivers. The reason is because you cannot construct a sand dam when water is flowing. It will be very difficult. So that's why we target the seasonal rivers. But what we are seeing nowadays is on even those non-seasonal rivers are drying up. And definitely, if you have the right banks, you have the right kind of soil, and you have a rock that cuts across the river, then definitely you can raise a sand dam on that particular river. This is a very good project that we have seen it transform the environment in a very positive way, regenerating the environment and even making the trees that had dried around the area to regrow again, to regenerate, and also for flora and fauna to flourish again. We've seen beekeeping being done in the most driest parts because of the construction of sand dams. So you can do sand dams anywhere, even if it's a non-seasonal river, as long as the water levels are very low and you can manage construction. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, Petra asks, I always wonder what happens to the villages along the rivers. If there is a sand dam above which stops the water, do they still get enough water? Do the villages down below the sand dam get enough water?
Okay, that's another good question that I would like also to give it my best shot. What I'll say is that researchers show that 98% of runoff water goes to the ocean. 98% is quite a lot of water. So a sand dam only harvests sometimes even less than 2%. If you walk around during the rainy season and you just stand on the banks and you calculate the time and the amount of water that flows in those seasonal rivers during the rainy season, you'll be surprised. A sand dam will fill only in a few hours. If it rains well, a sand dam can fill with water in less than 2 hours if it rains well upstream, not forgetting that water is coming from long way upstream. So we only harvest 98%, we only harvest 2%, 98% flows down into the ocean. Another thing that you really need to know is that these sand dams actually increase the water table. It's not that they prevent water from going downstream. We have seen in some areas where we have done a sand dam and then a farmer downstream digs a well and quite a lot of water comes from that well, even without a sand dam next to it, because actually of the increased water table on that river. So if you can do a cascade of dams, one sand dam following another, and maybe you manage to do 3 in one channel, after some years of rainfall, you are going to find that river has now transformed from a seasonal river to unseasonal. It's always flowing with a lot of water during even the dry season. So the water table rises. Yeah.
That is the beauty of these small traditional structures. We've seen that even in Rajasthan in India, where we've constructed little check dams called johars, that if you have them in strategic places and enough number of them, slowly the groundwater, the aquifers get recharged, and it's the entire region, the water in the wells rises. So it cannot but be good to hold the water in the ground, in the landscape, to recharge what is already drying up. And that's true across the world. So, you know, hearing you say that's what happens, this is really the way to go. Peter's raised his hand. Peter, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Kevin, for a wonderful and impressive work that you are doing in the Utooni area. Just a quick question. Looking at your data, I think, I don't recall exactly, I think 1,583 or something sand dams, which is huge. Wow. I don't know how many rivers there are in the Utooni area, but I only noticed 48 shallow wells. And I would have thought, given your presentation, that each sand dam would have had at least one well. Otherwise, how do people get the water? Unless they have the scoop, the scoop method. So can you explain a bit, the shallow wells and why there aren't at least one shallow well per sand dam? I was just a bit curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to say when our founder started constructing sand dams, the idea about a shallow well was not bought well by the partners or the donors, I would call them. They didn't really understand the importance of the shallow well. So very many sand dams were constructed without shallow wells at that particular time. It is just recently that we came to realize that it was a very, very important component. And we started going back to the dams that we have even done 15 or even 16 years ago, 18 years ago, to do the shallow wells. Because we came to realize community members were really suffering during the dry season to access water. These couples will be dug even to a depth of 8 feet deep. It was not safe, the water was not of good quality, and it will take quite a lot of time. So that's why some dams were constructed without shallow wells and others now are being constructed with shallow wells. It's a technology that is evolving with time. And I believe even now, where we are heading, we will stop talking about the hand pump and go now to the solar pumps in order to take the water far away from the sand dam site. Thank you.
A follow-on question from when I saw you putting in those concrete little pipes in, you said there were holes in them, and I've seen something like that in India, which allows the water to seep back into the ground. Do you want to say something more about that? Why they're special with the holes in them?
Yeah, I will talk about the culverts that we use to construct the culverts that we use to store to construct the shallow wells. They are perforated, they have holes in them in order to allow water to come into the well. As I had said, the shallow well is not the storage. The storage is the sand dam. But then there is a trench we dig that diverts water into this shallow well, and then we build a filtration system so that the water that comes into the well is clean. So that's why we have those holes around the culvert in order to allow water to get into the well and for the well to recharge faster.
So there's a follow-on question from
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, Kevin. Yes.
Hello? You're breaking off.
Vinny, maybe switch your video off because you're breaking up. Vinny,
Okay.
you've frozen.
Yeah, now I can get you. Can you please repeat the question?
As you can see, it's not, internet challenges exist in the West as well. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry for the
Please.
interruption. Okay, so Colin had asked, how often does that filtration system need to be replaced?
The filtration system doesn't need to be replaced. It can even go for more than 15 years without being replaced. You'll replace the filtration system if you realize there's some dirty water coming into the well, or maybe there's some kind of blockage. But it can go for 15 years before you experience such. Because when it rains very hard, a lot of dirt is washed away from the dam. So each year we receive rains, and so when the dam has quite a lot of water, more than the sand, definitely most of the dirt is washed out. Then we train communities on how to flush out the system during the rainy season. We ask them to allow children to play with the well, to pump water out of it after the first rainfall in order to get dirt out of the well. So it is pumped frequently during the first rains for it to clean itself. So we have those management procedures that are applied for community members to make sure that the quality of water is not compromised, and also the water that is coming into the shallow well does not decrease with time.
Oh, okay, very good. Keith, I can see Keith's hand up. Keith, would you like to ask your question? Could you unmute? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Keith Wright. One observation, please, and one question, Kevin. Thank you very much indeed. Fabulous work. I had the pleasure and honor of working with Utooni in the early 1980s when I was working with World Neighbors. And also Joshua Mukusia, he also came to work with World Neighbors at some point. Well, just one thing on a comment, all that surrounds all of this is the very strong community spirit that there always was. And it wasn't about a project, it was about life. It was their village, their community, their life, and whether money came in or out, life continued, they kept on working. And Joshua, as you know, the founder, but his wife, Margaret, was a co-founder, marvelous supporter, and brought the women into the project. So, a question though, Kevin, please. So some of the sand dams were built now, it will be 40 years ago. Are they still operational?
Yeah, I would say that we have sand dams which are 35 years old. There are some which are 38 years old. They are quite functional. And even there are some sites that are now the water aquifers are fully recharged. You go into those sand dams, you find the riparian growth has regenerated. The environment around the sand dam has also regenerated. And there is always water in those sand dams that were constructed very many years ago. One thing is that our communities need to be very proactive in managing the structure. When they see some kind of cracks coming at the banks, maybe it's been affected by where the water eats after the spillway. So what most community members do is they repair the apron. The apron is there where the water eats after when it is raining very heavily. So we have dams that are more than 3 decades and are doing very well. And the best thing with this water harvesting approach is that it requires minimal maintenance. It's not mechanical, so it requires minimal maintenance. And also maintaining is quite cheap. You just need a few bags of cement and a skilled laborer who are quite highly available in the community. Thank you very much to meet you, Keith. Yeah, I heard about the World Neighbors. I've also heard about the work Joshua Mukusia did with many other World Relief and many other organizations back in the days, working closely with Esther Idau and also his wife, Rhoda Mukusia.
Kevin, you're on mute. Sorry, Keith, you're on mute. Keith, would you like to say that again?
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, sorry, no, it's good to hear those names, and apologies for getting Rhoda's name muddled up, my old poor memory. Thank you.
No
Though. Thanks for the
problem.
work you're doing.
No
Wonderful.
problem. Thank you. Best
All
regards.
connections. Okay, so we have a question from John. I know John has had to leave our gathering and go to another meeting, which he couldn't avoid. But we will ask his question, and I'm sure he will catch up with the answer when he listens to the recording later. So could you say a little bit more on the construction? In the diagram, it said season 1, season 2, etc. So what I understand, says John, is that you build a section each year, not all at once, so that the fine silt washes down the river, leaving behind the coarse sand which holds the water well. Could you say something more about that, Kevin?
Yes, can you give us that slide, that diagram, please?
Yes, I'll share my screen. Can you hold on a minute? And that's
yeah, that should be slide number 6.
slide number 6.
Yeah.
Yes, here we go.
Yeah. Actually, when you look at those seasons, I would say
hold on a second. Yes, here we go. Yes.
That really does not portray the how you construct the dam. It portrays in most dry areas, very seriously, extremely dry areas. That's what happens. That is season 1 of the rain. The sand deposit can reach at that particular height. Then after the second rain season, the sand deposit gets to that height. Then after the third season, it gets to the third season height. Then maybe in the maximum of 5 seasons, the dam will be filled with sand. That is what it means. Because when you look at my photos, you have seen that there are some dams that are just fully filled with water, but no sand. So that is what we mean. When the dam is new, you'll tend to see there is more water than sand in it. But after the 3rd, 4th, 5th rainfall, it is going to be filled with sand, and underneath the sand, there's going to be water.
Right. Okay, so then there was a question from, how do you deal, what about, sorry, I'll ask Judy's question first. How about evaporation, since these are arid and semi-arid areas? Could you say something more about the rate of evaporation?
That's a question that most people ask, and one thing that I like to tell them is that every one of us has watched a movie of people in the desert, and where they access water is by digging into the soil to drink some water while they are in the desert. You see this in many movies. So what I'd like to say is that the best thing with this water harvesting technique is that water is stored underneath the sand. And research shows that 1 feet below the sand, there is 0 evaporation. That means water cannot evaporate. So that is why a sand dam is able to store water from one rain season to the other, because there is minimal or even 0 evaporation. So we don't want our water to be on the surface. We want it to be underneath the sand to prevent contamination, to reduce evaporation, and also to make it safe for community members to access water during the dry season. Thank you.
Thank you. So a question from Busisiwe. How do you deal with social issues, people who refuse to be part of the project and yet want access to the resources on completion? This is a really good question, Busisiwe, because we often have to deal with that in community projects in different parts of the world. So Kevin, I'd love to hear your answer.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. That is a very common problem in the community, where a group starts constructing a sand dam when they are maybe 120. And by the time they are finishing, you find they are around 62 or 70 members. Others have dropped off because of the amount of labor that is required to do the project. We facilitate permits for every sand dam that is constructed. In Kenya, you can apply for sand dam permits. That gives the group the mandate and the power to manage the project and to say who can use it and who cannot use it. because there's also a problem of sand harvesting. If a sand dam does not have a permit, some community members can decide to come and start selling sand, bringing these lorries to fetch sand at night and stealing sand from the community sand dam and selling it off. But when you have a permit from the government, it gives you the power and the mandate to manage that particular water harvesting structure, and which is a sand dam. So with regard to community contribution, we've made this clear, and we've seen that they know very clearly that if they are not part of it, then they'll will not be part and parcel of the clauses that come with the permit that the community applies for.
Thank you. Pradeep, you had a question? Pradeep, you had raised your hand?
No. It was by mistake.
It was answered. Okay. Okay. So next question is from Ferdinand. He asks, any specific native trees being considered around the sand dams to keep the water table high?
Yes, of course, there are specific trees, but we don't impose solutions to community members. We don't tell them what kind of trees they should plant. We like to promote indigenous trees. So our work is to advise them which trees are best to plant along the banks and in their farms. The most commonly trees that are grown along the banks, you'll tend to find most community members planting Grevillea. Other community members just leave the natural trees to grow along the banks. Recently, we heard that eucalyptus is taking quite a lot of water, but I have seen sand dams where eucalyptus is doing very well. So I really don't think eucalyptus takes quite a lot of water. It is human beings who have depleted the water in the world, and now they think some trees are taking more water than others. Thank you.
Kind of a follow-on question. So Paul asks, can vegetation be used rather than a cement wall to hold back the sand? And he's thinking of something like banana plants. This is assuming that the flow is not too much. And it is a question to be asked. What happened before there was cement? Well, how did communities build sand dams? What did they build them with?
That's a very good question. It takes me back to our founder's work in the early years. He came to realize about the potential of sand dams when he was doing gabions. He was not actually doing sand dams. They were doing gabions at that time. These were arranging stones along gullies to prevent soil erosion and land degradation. Then they realized behind these gabions, there could be water even during the dry season. And then they thought, why can't we make this wall much stronger? Why can't we reinforce it and see what happens after the rain season? And that's how the sand dam technology was developed, was established. The founders started as a gabions. So what I would say is that it depends on the flow of water, the amount of water that you're trying to harvest. If it is too much, then you need to go for a strong structure to hold the water back. Then if it is not a lot of water, maybe it's in your farm and there's some underneath floor that is cutting across, then you can do some bananas and see how much water you can harvest. So it's not rocket science, as we had said. It really depends on the viability and the kind of techniques you are using to hold water back and not make it to go away after the rain season. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, I'll come to you in a minute because I know I've asked one of your questions before. I just want to make sure that everybody who has a question gets at least one question in. There's a question from Daniel, and he says, how do you manage illegal sand harvesting in Makueni and Machkos counties?
I think I had talked about sand harvesting. One thing is that when we construct, the community contributes towards constructing sand dams, and then community members are working together to finish the construction of a sand dam. They are free to get sand for domestic use, not for sale. They can get sand from the sand dam for domestic use only, but not for sand. So you tend to find it's very little sand that is taken away by community members. Maybe to build a toilet, maybe a son is constructing a new house. they can get sand from the sand dam before the rain season. And then they are also shown where to take the sand, because we also want our community members to benefit from this sand, because if it accumulates too much and it's not being used, then it's going to be washed away during the next rain season. So we show them along the banks where they can get these extra sand deposits and use them for the projects that they are doing. Otherwise, I talked about the permits. Any community with that applies for the permit before or even after constructing a sand dam, they have the power to manage their project. They have the power to chase away those sand harvesters, and even they have the power to sell or not to sell the sand. So the permit is key towards managing and maintaining these structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Petra, would you like to ask your question? You have to unmute.
Yes, now I'm here. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you so much for this absolutely great presentation. My question is, I have two. One is about, you said before about the river, about the villages downstream. Does it mean they get water because the sand dam will overflow when it's filled up, and this way they get the water?
Yeah. If you could have time during the dry season, I will take you somewhere right now. if a miracle would happen for you to be here now during the dry season, I will take you to. Yes, please, welcome. I will take you to a dam that was done 12 years ago. Okay. And now there is water flowing from that river going downstream.
Okay.
And it has not rained for the past 7 months here.
Okay.
And for those of us who are living in Kenya, they know how dry this area now is. The most parts of the country are very dry. The government is doing famine relief, cash transfers. The situation is really bad. But you go to a sand dam and you find that there is water flowing downstream to other communities who can access the water downstream from their locations. So as we talked, is about recharging the water aquifers and gradually increasing the water table to a point where the rivers stop drying, and even the dry season, you find there is some water flowing.
Okay. Then the other question is, where our villages are, this is very far away from the riverbed. So if we would build a sand dam in one of these riverbeds, how far could you actually, or is it possible to pump the water far away? If you could, how far away could you actually pump it? Because we just recently drilled a borehole and we are unable to use the water, since the water the mineral content is up to 10 times higher as normal, like magnesium, sulfur, fluoride is very high, the hardness. So we have no other chance. So we know we cannot drill a borehole anymore in the area. I discovered that. But if we could have a sand dam, could we pump it maybe 7, 8, 10 kilometers away?
Yes, that's a very good question. Back in the days, 15 years ago, we didn't have very good solar pumps. And solar pumps were very expensive back then. What we are doing with Primates World Relief Development Fund is that we are trying to improve the accessibility of water for community members who are living far away from the sand dam site. Because without proper supply, then it means those people living far away from the sand dam will not enjoy the full benefits of the dam. So what we are doing nowadays is we are implementing solar pumps, which are being implemented near the sand dam site. And then there is a pipe that goes into the well, and instead of the hand pump, you install that solar pump, and then somewhere uphill, you install a big water tank, maybe 10,000 liters or whatever capacity you want. And water is pumped there during the day, during daytime, when the sun is shining. It's pumped and it fills that tank, and then community members can use that water for 2 or even 3 days before they open up again the system to pump some more water from the well, which is next to the sand dam. Okay. So with the solar pumps, we are finding it quite viable to take water far away from the sand dam site.
Mhm. One more question about the cost. So to build a general sand dam, what are the average costs of one?
I would say the average cost of constructing a sand dam will be 1.5 million Kenya shillings. 1.5 million, divide that by 100 to get that's around 15,000 US dollars to do one sand dam,
And
which will benefit not less than 1,000 households.
Okay, and additionally, we in our case, we would then need the pipes to reach probably the water tank. You know, there is a 50,000 liter water tank we could reach. Is that correct?
Yes, they are this. You don't need a complicated pipe. You just need a 2-inch or even 1.5-inch pipe, because these are systems that keeps running all day long and even in the evening sometimes if there is enough lighting. So you can put a small flexible pipe. You don't need very huge pipes.
Yes, I know that.
Yes, just to take the water uphill.
So if you could contact me, I would be very, very happy. Very happy. I sent you a message before.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen a message here on the chat.
There
Yes.
is also in the there is also in the presentation is Kevin's email, Peter. If you
Thank you so much.
send it across. Yeah. Yes. Does that answer your questions? Does that cover your questions?
I'm so happy. Last time I was so happy. This time I'm so happy. Thank you so much. Yes.
It makes us happy. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this forum, that there is a cross-fertilization, there's a cross-connection of what is actually working on the ground, how communities are being able, without the top-down management, how there is a horizontal weaving of wisdom and impact action, how that is regenerating local areas. And that's the whole purpose and the goal of this. Now, before we're almost towards the end, what I do want to say to everybody is many of you are new on the forum today. So if you want to be kept updated for the next session, there are, as very much like this, there'll be somebody else presenting their community project on how they are managing the water in their landscape. So, and the request has been that we have these once a month at least. So do put your name and your emails in, so we make sure then that you are part of the email that goes around, and we can keep you updated. Any questions you have for Kevin, you're very welcome to contact him directly, or you can send the questions to us. We will be in any case putting up Kevin's presentation, as well as the recording of this session will come up on waterways.world/Africa, so you can revisit it there. There's also the previous people who have presented in the past. Their presentations and recordings are also up there. So it's slowly it's a resource that's building up, which then eventually we will see how it can reach more and more communities. So that's just a bit of housekeeping here. So any other questions? Does anybody have any more burning questions, or not so burning, but questions for Kevin that could be answered? He's here very much with us, so do feel free. Anybody has any questions here? I would like to then comment one bit about the community aspect of this, and this is what we found very inspiring. That whenever it's top down, anything that starts in the community chugs along for a bit, and then it sort of comes to a halt. But when it is how Kevin showed, when it is a collaboration with the community, when it is the community doing it, when the community is asked for their, they design it, they choose the land, they choose the area, they work on it together, they contribute something. For us, we found that's the most powerful way of having something, getting something done, something that regenerates the landscape, not just for now, but for future generations. It's so simple. When we do something, it's ours, and then there's a certain pride in. It's that aspect of community involvement that a lot of projects forget. And that's the aspect we want to bring out, that these are community methods. These are methods that communities have been employing for generations. They know what to do. They don't have to be, have gone to universities to become engineers and scientists. They are the engineers and scientists from whom we've learned. And if we involve them, then that is the network that will weave the change that we want to see in the world. Now, of course, we want to see it happen tomorrow, but working with communities, knitting it slowly but surely, and bringing our communities across the world on board is the way we will deal with global warming, climate change, all the issues that are related to the environment and the landscapes. And we seem to have forgotten that. I don't know why. It's as if book learning seems to have a higher place than traditional community wisdom. And the attempt with the Water School and of the Flow Partnership and all the wonderful organizations that we are coming into contact with in Africa, with ASAL, etc., is all about bringing that voice of the poorest of the poor, of the communities who are doing this work and doing it successfully, and then sharing it across the world. So one of the projects that we did in India, and I want to touch on it, is precisely this. We wanted the project, we started the project with them, we recorded it, made a language neutral film, and then you took it to completely another side of the world, to a community that was experiencing water and aridity and water problems in Colombia. So from Rajasthan in India to Colombia and South Africa. And the response was magnificent. The community immediately over there, they took it on. For them, it was, wow, there are other ways, there are other communities who are doing something like this. We also have something similar called Hawaii. And then there was the spirited discussion. So it also not just gives you a weaving of a different method of community, it also gives you a feeling that we aren't alone in this. It is that the feeling of collaboratively looking after our planet starts being generated. And that's what we find most energizing and most powerful. Would anybody like to add anything to this? In their work, have they experienced what they've experienced, what they feel could be done to enhance this kind of weaving of community effort? Kevin, would you like to say something from your experience?
Yeah, I'd like to say something with regard to what you've just said. One thing that I've noticed over the past years is that if solutions are to work positively to the benefit of the community, then the community has to be on the forefront in coming up with those solutions. I also came to realize that our communities are very intelligent. They are brave and they have a lot of experience. The problem is that sometimes they are confused on what to go for. You'll go to a community where they think a borehole will work better for them, but you go and find that they are very good sand dam sites in the rivers that they have in their area. So a participatory approach of doing projects is very important. Number one, it makes it much easier for you to implement projects. If you go and just tell communities now that this place is very good for doing sand dams, then be prepared to face a very difficult time in selling your idea. But if you tell them, you ask them how many water harvesting methods do you know, and they tell you balls, they tell you water pans, they tell you pipe to water, they tell you sand dams, they tell you shallow wells, and then you exponent on each one of them. Then they are giving you the advantages and disadvantages of each one of them. Then you'll be empowering them and they'll be able to make a very wise decision on the water harvesting methodology that is going to benefit them. When it comes to implementation, is that you'll find that for we development practitioners, we very much find ourselves working with community members who are above the age of 30 years. because the youth are out there in the urban areas looking for formal employment, engaging in maybe casual labor or other employment opportunities in the urban centers. So most of the time in the rural areas, we find ourselves working with 30 years and above. And that is not a age group that can be pushed around like small kids. So it's very, very important to engage communities even when designing projects, when drawing budgets, when trying to schedule when activities are going to happen. When is the planting season? When is the harvesting season? Because nobody is going to come to the sand dam site to work when it is a planting season like now. We are waiting for the rains, everybody needs to plant. Or maybe you are calling people to come to a construction site when it is time to harvest. Then it means their crops, if they are not harvested, they'll be eaten by birds and other animals. So it's very important to involve communities during the early stages of planning and as the project implementation goes on. And by doing that, you will avoid a lot of challenges that might happen if you don't do it. Thank you.
So true. If you involve, they are the ones who live on the ground. They are the ones who know the challenges. They are the ones who've known how to deal with those challenges. And that is the wisdom, the successful. They are the ones who know which part of their action has been successful, what works, what doesn't work. And that's the wisdom we need to harness. Kevin, thank you very, very much. That was just absolutely magical hearing about how you're spreading this work with the communities and keeping each arid area in the different regions, making them lush and green again with the work of the sand dams. We're coming to the end of our session. If there's any last minute burning question, do ask. Otherwise, all these traditional methods we have, the platform is called waterways.world, and you'll find different traditional methods from different countries slowly coming up there. And if you put /Africa, you'll find the work, all from this forum, all the different presentations, etc. over there. We will let you know when the next one is. This is the last one for this year, but next year, early next year, January or February, we will let you know who will be the one presenting their work. And in the meantime, stay well and have a, go well into the next year. And thank you very much for your participation.